Brazil's World Cup is over, and Neymar isn't hiding how he feels about it. After the defeat to Norway, he appeared to suggest he should have started the match instead of watching from the bench. A claim that's now putting Carlo Ancelotti under heavy scrutiny. Here's what happened. Let's set the scene. Brazil versus Norway, round of 16, MetLife Stadium, New Jersey. This was supposed to be the moment. Neymar's fourth World Cup. Possibly his last shot at a trophy that's eluded him his entire career. And when the team sheet dropped, his name wasn't on it, not in the starting 11 anyway. Brazil faced Norway with a place in the 2026 World Cup quarterfinals on the line. And once again, by tactical decision, Neymar started on the bench. This wasn't a one-off. It was a decision that upset many, considering Neymar could be playing in his last World Cup. Here's the thing that made it sting even more. Just days earlier, against Japan, Neymar hadn't played a single minute, not one. He wasn't injured and was available to play, but Ancelotti decided to bring on Endrick, Gabriel Martinelli, Fabinho, and Danilo Santos instead. A fully fit Neymar at what could be his last World Cup, watching from the bench as guys off the bench decided a knockout match. Ancelotti had an explanation ready. He said he'd had a conversation with Neymar before that Japan game, telling him he'd come on around the 60th or 65th minute if the score was still level. He said he'd spoken with him that he would have come in at the 60th or 65th minute, but they equalized and he didn't want to change the structure because the team had control of the game. Martinelli scored the winner in the 96th minute. The gamble paid off, but Neymar never got on the pitch. So heading into Norway, everybody wanted to know, would this finally be the game Neymar started? Lucas Paquetá had gone down with a hamstring injury in the Japan match, opening up a spot in midfield. Surely that changes things, right? Brazil were forced into a midfield reshuffle following Paquetá's injury, which opened up speculation over a possible structural change in Brazil's attack, with Neymar widely expected to return in the number 10 role. Ancelotti had even teased it publicly. Before the match, he told reporters Neymar can play 90 minutes. And he can play with Vinicius Jr. I think they will play together. That quote spread everywhere. Fans took it as confirmation. Neymar was finally starting, then the actual lineup came out. When the official team sheet was released, Neymar was named among the substitutes once again. No CAF issue, no fitness concern, just a decision. As per media sources, Neymar had participated fully in training and was declared match fit. But the final decision was understood to be tactical, with Brazil prioritizing defensive balance and off-the-ball intensity in a high-pressure knockout encounter. Instead, Ancelotti went with Gabriel Martinelli in the number 10 role, Matheus Cunha up top, and Vinicius Jr. out wide. By this point, this wasn't just a tactical footnote anymore, it was a pattern. And people around the team were starting to say the quiet part out loud. Ancelotti himself admitted, ahead of the Norway game, that Neymar wasn't thrilled about any of it. Ancelotti confirmed Neymar wasn't happy with the secondary role he was playing for Brazil that summer, though he commended him for how he'd handled it, saying he's not satisfied with his role, but he's behaving very well. He went further. Ancelotti said Neymar doesn't directly say he wants to play, but that desire is quite clear, adding that it's a positive thing because a player cannot be happy sitting on the bench. Read between those lines for a second. That's the head coach of Brazil on the record, telling the world his biggest global superstar is unhappy being benched repeatedly, heading into a World Cup knockout game. And one report went even further, describing exactly where Neymar's head was at. Neymar was becoming deeply frustrated by his limited role in the World Cup campaign, following another setback. The experienced campaigner was certain that he could have played a more significant role instead of being used as a late substitute. That's not a rumor from a random fan account. That's the reporting going into the Norway match. Neymar, one of the most decorated players of his generation, sitting there convinced he deserved more than late cameo minutes in the biggest games of the tournament. And it wasn't just about ego. Brazil's attack had been misfiring in stretches all tournament. Brazil had struggled to control the tempo of matches, with Lucas Paquetá playing more as a second winger while Matheus Cunha operated as center forward, leaving Bruno Guimarães as the only player capable of controlling the game, and he'd often been overwhelmed due to lack of support in that role. If there was ever a night that screamed for Neymar's vision and composure from the first whistle, this was it. A knockout game, their best player fit. And he was on the bench again. So when the whistle blew to start the match, Neymar was standing on the touchline in his warm-up gear, watching Martinelli, Cunha, and Vinicius try to break down a Norway side that had already caused one of the tournament's biggest shocks by eliminating Ivory Coast. The stage was set for either redemption or heartbreak, and Brazil's biggest name wasn't on the field to influence which one it would be, not yet anyway. That decision, leaving him out again, is the thread that runs through everything that happened next. Because what unfolded over the following 2 hours in New Jersey would turn a tactical call into one of the most scrutinized selection decisions in modern Brazilian football history. The match kicked off, and for a while, it looked like Ancelotti's gamble might just work out again. Brazil had control. They were pushing, probing, trying to find the breakthrough against a Norway side many had written off before the tournament even started. Then came the moment that would define the entire match and, in hindsight, maybe the entire tournament. Brazil had a golden opportunity to take the lead in the first half after Christopher Ager was penalized for a foul on Matthias Cunha following a VAR review. And Bruno Guimaraes stepped up but saw his penalty comfortably saved by Norway goalkeeper Orjan Nyland. Now here's where it gets messy. Because Neymar, the guy sitting on the bench, was reportedly the player the numbers said should have been taking that kick. Ancelotti later explained his reasoning to the media, and it wasn't exactly convincing. In one version, he told reporters, according to that, Neymar was the best person to take the penalty, and then Rafinha, and then Bruno. So we chose him as we felt he was the best on the field. Except Neymar wasn't on the field, he was on the bench. So how do you hand penalty duty to the third best option on your own list, while the top 2 guys are watching from the sideline? Other reports had the order slightly different, Rafinha first, then Neymar, then Guimaraes, but the punchline stayed the same either way. Ancelotti said statistics showed Rafinha was the best option as penalty taker, with Neymar next, and after that, Bruno Guimaraes. Neymar, again, was higher up that list than the man who actually took it. And Neymar wasn't even in the building's worth of options being used, because he was still sitting. The penalty miss loomed over the rest of the half. Brazil kept the ball, kept probing, but couldn't find the finish. Then midway through the second half, Ancelotti finally made his move. Neymar was introduced in the 68th minute, replacing Gabriel Martinelli with the score deadlocked at 0-0, part of 2 attacking substitutions in a 10-minute window. With Endrick also coming on for Matthias Cunha, Endrick going on to miss a gilt-edged chance within moments of entering the pitch. For a few minutes, it felt like the dream scenario everyone in Brazil had been waiting weeks for. Neymar finally on the pitch in a knockout game, alongside Vinicius Jr., trying to be the difference maker one more time. Then Erling Haaland happened. After withstanding sustained Brazilian pressure, substitute Andreas Schelderup delivered a pinpoint cross for Erling Haaland to head home in the 79th minute, before the striker added a second with a composed left-footed finish to seal one of the biggest upsets of the entire tournament. 2 goals in 11 minutes. Game over basically before it had even really begun for Neymar. There was a late twist. Neymar got the chance for what would be his last goal with the Brazilian national team minutes later. After Norway's Leo Østigård was called for a foul in his own penalty area when he elbowed Casemiro in the head. Neymar stepped up himself this time and buried it. Neymar converted a stoppage time penalty after Leo Østigård fouled Casemiro, but the goal came too late to alter the outcome. A consolation, nothing more. The final score read 2-1 Norway. Brazil were eliminated from the World Cup by Norway in the earliest elimination for Ancelotti's team since 1990. And just to put that number in perspective, Brazil had now suffered their earliest World Cup exit since 1990, the beginning of their longest barren run in World Cup history, having failed to lift the trophy in each of the last 6 editions since reigning supreme in 2002. Norway, on the other hand, made history of their own. Norway stunned Brazil with a 2-1 win, as Erling Haaland scored a brace to send his side through to the World Cup quarterfinals for the first time in their history. The stats afterward painted a brutal picture of just how far Brazil had been outplayed in the areas that matter most in a knockout game. Neymar's stoppage time penalty was merely a consolation goal, too little, too late for the Seleção, who were outpossessed 66-36% before his international retirement announcement. That's not a typo. Norway, the supposed underdogs ranked 20th in the world, controlled the ball almost 2-1 against 5-time world champions Brazil. And in the middle of all that statistical carnage sat one uncomfortable fact that everybody in Brazil was thinking about walking out of that stadium. The guy who scored their only goal, who took the penalty that actually went in, had spent nearly 70 minutes of the biggest game of the tournament sitting on a bench. Meanwhile, Bruno Guimaraes, not exactly a natural penalty taker, had missed the one that could have put them ahead when it mattered most. Norway advanced, Brazil packed their bags, and back in the locker room and in front of the cameras minutes later, the fallout was about to get personal. Once the final whistle went, the cameras didn't just find Neymar. They found almost the entire Brazilian squad. And what came out over the next hour told its own story about how badly this loss had cut through the group. Start with Casemiro, the veteran midfielder who's carried Brazil's engine room for close to a decade, could barely get his words out. One of the most criticized players in the Brazilian national team, Casemiro became very emotional when speaking to K's TV about the latest disappointment felt by the country's fans. He managed to get out that it was a heavy day for everyone, that being knocked out of a World Cup always hits hard, and that there wasn't much left to do but own it. In front of the supporters who'd believed in this group one more time, Vinicius Jr. wasn't much better. He stood in the mixed zone and basically apologized on behalf of the entire team, telling reporters he wanted to say sorry to the fans who, once again, had put their faith in this group only to watch it end early. Then came the voice that really turned the temperature up. South American football analyst Tim Vickery, who didn't hold back on what he just watched. He called it what he saw it as, telling the BBC bluntly, "This is an unmitigated disaster." But Vickery went further than just reacting to the scoreline. He went straight at the decision-making that had defined Brazil's entire tournament, the decision to bring Neymar back into the fold at all, and then the decision to throw him on in that state in that game. He laid out exactly how Ancelotti had backed himself into a corner. It never deserved to work with Neymar, Vickery said, adding that Ancelotti had broken every red line he'd set for himself, that Neymar would have to earn his way back and that he wouldn't take injured or underprepared players. He didn't stop there either. "I cannot believe Neymar came on. He can hardly move, and it meant that he had to readjust his side. He had to take Vinicius Jr. and Endrick away from goal." And then the line that really landed. It opened up the side more and they conceded 2 goals. Read that again. One of the most respected voices in South American football basically said, the decision to introduce Neymar, after benching him for most of the tournament, was what broke Brazil's defensive shape at exactly the moment Haaland pounced. Meanwhile, in front of his own microphone, Ancelotti wasn't backing down from any of his calls. Asked directly about the missed penalty and the constant chopping and changing around Neymar's role, he leaned on the same explanation he'd been giving all tournament: the numbers. A missed penalty by Bruno Guimaraes in the first half contributed to Brazil's defeat. But Ancelotti said statistics showed the Newcastle midfielder to be the best option to take the spot kick. He was calm about it, almost unnervingly so, given what had just happened. He confirmed he wasn't walking away from the job. Ancelotti confirmed he would not step down as head coach, saying, "We must continue to work and improve and find new ideas. I believe that this loss is not the end, but the beginning of a new cycle." He told reporters fans didn't take that quite as calmly. Across social media and phone-in shows back in Brazil, the questions kept circling back to the same theme. Why was the country's all-time top scorer treated as a fallback option in a knockout game he might never play again? One widely shared take summed up what a lot of people were feeling watching the penalty situation unfold. With Neymar sitting and Bruno Guimaraes stepping up to the spot, it looked to plenty of frustrated fans like putting your worst option on the biggest moment while your best one watched from 10 yards away. And this wasn't just noise from anonymous accounts. Norway's own camp had been paying close attention to the Neymar situation in the build-up too. Norway manager Ståle Solbakken had spent the days before the match fielding questions about a viral dressing room clip involving his own team. But the subtext of every press conference on both sides kept circling back to the same man on the Brazilian bench, and whether he'd get his chance. By the time the dust settled that night, 3 distinct storylines had converged on the same conclusion from 3 completely different angles: Casemiro's grief, Vickery's analysis, and Ancelotti's own defense of his selection math. All 3, in their own way, pointed straight back at the decision to keep Neymar out of the starting 11. Until it was almost too late, and none of that fallout compared to what came next. When the cameras finally found Neymar himself, if the reactions from teammates and analysts had already turned the temperature up, nothing hit harder than the sight of Neymar himself. In the minutes after that final whistle, he didn't walk off the pitch, he collapsed onto it. Neymar slumped to the ground in tears after the final whistle at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Before being consoled by teammates, cameras caught him being helped up, barely able to stand, surrounded by players trying to console a man who just watched his 4th World Cup. and quite possibly his last shot at ever winning one, slip away from a bench he never should have been sitting on. For as long as he did, when he finally spoke to Globo, his voice cracked through every sentence. I tried, now it's over," he said. "I started here, I finished here." That last line carried weight beyond the moment. Neymar made his debut for Brazil against the United States in a friendly at MetLife Stadium in August 2010, scoring his first international goal. 16 years later in that same stadium, his international career came to its end. But underneath the tears was something more pointed than grief. This wasn't just sadness about losing. It was frustration that had been building for weeks, finally boiling over in front of the entire football world. Remember, this was a man who, according to those close to the situation, had spent the tournament convinced he deserved more than what he was getting. Neymar had been becoming deeply frustrated by his limited role in the campaign following another setback. He was certain he could have played a more significant role instead of being used as a late substitute. Think about what that means in practice. Game after game, tournament after tournament, Scotland, Japan. And now Norway. Neymar kept getting told to wait. Wait for extra time. Wait for the 60th minute. Wait for the moment Ancelotti decided the structure could handle him. And every single time, by the time he actually got on the pitch, the game had either already been decided or was slipping away too fast to fix. Even Ancelotti's own words, delivered with what sounded like genuine sympathy, only underlined how aware everyone around the camp was of exactly how unhappy Neymar had become. Ancelotti had confirmed Neymar wasn't happy with the secondary role he was playing that summer, though he commended him for how he'd handled the situation, saying he's not satisfied with his role, but he's behaving very well. Behaving very well is one way to describe a man doing what he was told again and again, while sitting on the bench in what would turn out to be his final tournament. But the emotion that spilled out on that field afterward told a different story than the composed press conference version Ancelotti had been offering all summer. This wasn't a player at peace with his role. This was a player who'd swallowed it game after game, and finally let it all out the moment it no longer mattered whether he held it together for the cameras. The numbers on his Brazil career, recited by every outlet covering his exit that night, only made the frustration sting more. His goal in stoppage time made him just the second Brazilian man, alongside Pelé, to score in 4 World Cups, and his 130 appearances for his country are second behind only Cafu's 142 on Brazil's all-time list. The spot kick was Neymar's 80th goal for Brazil, putting him 3 ahead of Pelé for the men's national record. A career-best goal tally, the most caps outside one man, 4 World Cups played, and still somehow spending the biggest knockout match of his final tournament, watching the first 67 minutes from the bench. Pelé, though, won 3 World Cups. Neymar doesn't have any. Brazil's last World Cup title came in 2002, and the team hasn't made it past the quarterfinals with Neymar on its World Cup roster. 4 attempts, 4 disappointments. And this time, the disappointment came wrapped in a selection decision that a lot of people, from a leading South American football analyst to millions of fans back home, believed had actively made things worse rather than better. There was one more detail from that night that fans latched onto almost immediately. After burying his penalty, Neymar reportedly exchanged words with Norway's goalkeeper before walking away. After scoring his penalty, Neymar had words for Norway goalkeeper Orjan Nyland. Nobody outside that moment knows exactly what was said, but given everything that had built up over the previous 90 minutes, the missed penalty by a teammate, the late introduction, the frustration that had been simmering under the surface for weeks, it wasn't hard to read the moment as a release of everything he'd been holding in. By the time he walked off that field for the final time in a Brazil shirt, the story writing itself in real time wasn't really about the scoreline anymore. It was about a legend who'd spent an entire tournament being told to wait his turn, finally getting his moment when the game, and maybe his whole international career, had already slipped past the point of no return. In the days that followed, the picture around Brazil's national team started coming into focus. And it wasn't just about one missed penalty or one late substitution anymore. It was about an entire generation walking out the door at once. Casemiro's tears in the mixed zone weren't just about the scoreline. Multiple reports pointed to that night being his last in a Brazil shirt too. Ancelotti said a crucial element of Brazil's rebuild would be finding new players in midfield, with Neymar saying he would retire from international competition after the elimination, and the likes of Casemiro and Fabinho expected to follow him. 3 of Brazil's most experienced players gone within days of each other. The spine of a golden generation dismantled in one brutal week in New Jersey. Ancelotti, for his part, wasn't going anywhere. He'd signed a 4-year extension just months before the tournament, and he made clear he intended to see it through. Having signed a 4-year contract extension 2 months ago, Ancelotti said he is now looking to oversee a new cycle with the team. He framed the disaster in New Jersey as the start of something, not the end of it. Coach Carlo Ancelotti lamented Brazil's shock exit from the World Cup, but stated that this loss is not an end, but the beginning of the new adventure. He was specific about where the rebuild needs to start. We have to think about the future, but it is very evident that in the midfield. I think that we have to move some players, he said. We need some young talent. We need some high-level players coming into Brazilian football. This national team has a very solid group, great players that continue, and some new players that can come in. But no amount of forward-looking language could erase what had just happened to the record books. Brazil's early exit from the competition marked their worst performance at a World Cup since a group stage elimination in 1966. 5-time champions, tournament favorites heading in, gone in the round of 16 to a team that had never been past a group stage before this summer. And Norway's part of this story kept writing itself too. Norway reached the last 8 for the first time as Brazil made their earliest World Cup exit since 1990. This after finishing top of their group with a draw against Morocco, and wins over Haiti and Scotland, and eliminating Japan in the round of 32. With a 2-1 victory, the historical weight of that result kept getting repeated in every recap. Before that game, Brazil had played 11 matches in the round of 16, winning 9, drawing 1 and losing 1. Their solitary defeat coming 1-0 to arch rivals Argentina in 1990, when a mesmerizing Diego Maradona dribble set up the only goal. 36 years and the only other team ever to beat Brazil. At this stage of a World Cup wore yellow and blue jerseys of a totally different rivalry. Now Norway sat alongside Argentina in that exclusive, unwanted club. As for Neymar, the numbers he leaves behind speak for themselves. Regardless of how this final chapter played out, he will finish his international career as Brazil's all-time leading scorer with 80 goals. 3 ahead of Pelé, no World Cup title to go with it. No fairy tale final act, just a stoppage time consolation goal. A tearful walk off the same field where it all began 16 years earlier. And a tournament defined as much by where he wasn't standing the bench, as by anything he did once he finally got the chance to play. Ancelotti, for now, keeps his job and his 4-year mandate. The Brazilian Federation hasn't signaled any change of course, publicly backing the plan to rebuild around the existing coaching staff rather than start over from scratch. Whether that patience holds depends entirely on how the qualifying road looks a year or 2 from now, once the dust from this defeat has properly settled, and the next generation of Brazilian talent starts to emerge from the academies Ancelotti keeps pointing toward. What's certain is that for weeks, the story out of the Brazil camp wasn't really about tactics or formations. It was about a legend who spent a tournament waiting his turn, a coach who kept promising the timing would be right, and a night in New Jersey where that timing finally ran out for Neymar, for Casemiro, and for an entire era of Brazilian football that walked off that pitch together and never came back. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content. Sources: Carlo Ancelotti explains why he scrapped plan to bring on Neymar against Japan. Did Ancelotti deceive? Whether Neymar started for Brazil versus Norway. Brazil's World Cup exit, Ancelotti on shock Norway loss. Carlo Ancelotti reveals why Neymar Jr. did not play for Brazil versus Japan. Ancelotti's Neymar pick for Brazil is an act of faith. Tearful Neymar, Brazil career over after World Cup exit to Norway. Stale Solbakken backs Norway to challenge Brazil despite Ancelotti praise. Carlo Ancelotti vows to start new cycle after Brazil's World Cup exit. Neymar retirement, Carlo Ancelotti, Brazil v Norway World Cup. Brazil 1-2 Norway. Holland scores brace to eliminate Ancelotti's side. Neymar announces Brazil retirement after 2026 World Cup upset versus Norway. Brazil's loss to Norway the beginning of a new adventure. Ancelotti. Why Neymar isn't playing for Brazil versus Norway at 2026 World Cup. Why isn't Neymar starting today for Brazil versus Norway? A crying Neymar was inconsolable after Brazil's World Cup elimination. Will Neymar start for Brazil against Holland's Norway? Why is Neymar Jr. not playing Brazil versus Norway clash? Why isn't Neymar starting for Brazil against Norway? Why is Neymar not starting today for Brazil versus Norway? Neymar breaks down in tears after likely final World Cup game. Casemiro in tears, Vini apologizes, and more after the exit. Brazil's Ancelotti, new ideas after World Cup exit. Casemiro tears up after final World Cup match for Brazil. Casemiro injury update. Is Casemiro playing today versus Norway? We have to look for new ideas, says Brazil coach Ancelotti.